When I was about 16 years old, I worked at a restaurant as a pianist. It was a nice, semi-formal restaurant. Not very trendy, but seen as a well-established place where parents would take their graduating children and elderly couples would come have date nights. White tablecloths and fresh flowers on each table, it was a pretty popular place. It was a great gig, especially since I was quite young, and my parents would drop me off in the evenings twice a week, Friday and Saturday nights. It was in an older part of town, the kind of place where you didn't go walking at night, but I live in South Africa, so you pretty much never walk at night. We have car guards in most South African cities, and while there's sometimes dodgy guys trying to make quick drug money because they found a reflective vest in the trash, my restaurant had a wonderful guy. His name was Daddy, and he was a huge dude from Zimbabwe. He'd always walk me up the path when my parents dropped me off, and come to tell me when my parents had arrived to pick me up. Part of my pay was a free staff meal, and on this occasion my mother had decided to come in early with me so we could eat together. As we walked in, the owner immediately saw me and dashed over to us, clearly bursting to tell me something. Apparently, earlier that day, a man had come in and asked him if the piano started at 8 tonight as usual. The owner, Paul, had confirmed yes, and asked him if he wanted to book a table. He had said no, and Paul, seeing that the man looked like he probably couldn't afford to eat there anyway, asked why he inquired. The man informed him that he'd had a dream, and that he was going to come in and marry the pianist. The pianist was his soulmate, and he wasn't going to miss out on his chance to let her know. Quite bewildered by this information, and thinking that maybe a friend from school was playing a joke, I asked what the guy looked like. I remember Paul trying to put it nicely. Well, he was sort of short, 30-ish, plump, long hair, he had a hat on. I had no friends who matched this description, and at this stage I was the only female pianist at the establishment, so my mother and I were pretty weirded out. We sat down in the closed-in balcony to order, right by a big window. It was about 7:45, getting dark outside, and I was ready to leave the table to start playing, when a movement in the shrubs outside the window caught my eye. "Mom," I whispered, and she looked over to where I had jerked my head. There, skulking outside the window and watching us, was a short, very overweight guy. He was wearing all black, with a dirty black trench coat and a black fedora. He had long, dark, stringy hair and a large silver cross hanging around his neck. It was a sinking, horrible feeling, realizing that he was watching me. I don't know if it was mostly because I was pretty young and sheltered, but realizing that this strange man knew who I was, what I looked like, thought about me, wanted to marry me, made me feel almost debilitated with fear. My mom, however, quickly realized that while I was in the view of the window, she wasn't. She told me to stay there and got up and left the table, staying out of the view of the man. She went to the manager and got him to phone Daddy on his cell phone. We were sitting towards the back of the restaurant and Daddy was on the street. After about a minute of me sitting there, pretending not to notice the beady-eyed, sweaty-looking man outside, I saw the light of Daddy's torch bouncing off the hedges. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw the man start to scuffle around, trying to work out which way to go. I took this opportunity to stand up and get away from the window. I sat in the back until Daddy came in to tell me that it was okay to start playing. They never told me whether he ran away or had to be removed or exactly what happened. They wouldn't tell me any details, which sort of made me more apprehensive. Daddy just said that he would never let him back in. He told me that he drove a rusty, red, small car. I'd later find out that it was a really old Fiat Uno. I found out because every 2 weeks or so, on one of the nights I was working, he'd be parked down the street, far away enough from the restaurant that Daddy couldn't make him leave. Sometimes, even around a corner, out of eyesight until we were driving home. I knew the sound of the car, the rattly old exhaust pipe, and I knew the number plate. Sometimes when we drove past, I could see the shadow of him in the driver's seat. Sometimes I couldn't. I always wondered where he was then. From then on, my parents had Daddy's number saved to their phones, and my dad would come get me when it was dark. Sometimes when I was waiting to be picked up if we closed early, I started heading down the path to see if my parents were back. Daddy would see me from the gate. Sometimes he beckoned me to come down and wait with him, and we'd hang out. Sometimes he shook his head and said, "Not yet, sissy." That's when the car would be down the street. I never saw the man outside of his car again, so there was never really anything I could do about it. It was always in the back of my mind, though. I continued to work there until my final year of high school, and I quit when Daddy moved back to Zimbabwe. This happened last year at a new job. This guy Mike was in charge of my training. At first, he seemed like a nice guy. We'd talk about common interests, have lunch together, normal things coworkers do. Then, one day, he started to overshare things from his personal life, like telling me that he hated his wife, who I knew was pregnant at the time. Once he even said, "If I told you I cut myself in a place that only God and I can see, would you want to know where?" Now, keep in mind, I'd known the guy for all of 3 weeks when this started happening, and the most personal thing I'd ever shared with him is that I had been on Prozac for my first year of college, which I didn't think was a big deal because doctors prescribe it like candy. Whatever, I didn't want to piss him off because I was worried he would start bad-mouthing me to the managers. Still, I did my best to change the subject when he went too far, which was becoming a daily thing. I also avoided being alone with him as much as possible. That didn't stop Mike from deciding that I was now his best friend. He started actually referring to me as his sister from another mother, and then just his sister in front of other people from the office. The first couple times he did it, I laughed it off, but then it stopped being funny because it seemed like in his mind, this was now a fact. He even tried to make the relationship official on Facebook. I had added him along with some other people from work. Big mistake. By this point, my actual biological brother was itching to have a talk with this guy, but I told him it wasn't a big deal, and I tried to gently extricate myself from the situation. Well, gently extricating myself didn't work. I was having lunch with this other guy from work in the cantina one day. He had finished the same course I did, different year though, so we had a lot to talk about, and I really liked having someone around my age to talk to from work. I could see Mike giving him the stink eye from across the room. He was eating alone, in a very obvious "look what you're doing to me" display. That same evening, the coworker I was having lunch with messaged me on Facebook to tell me that Mike had been talking to him over Slack about me. We use Slack at work, and some people have it on their phone for out-of-hours stuff, but it's typically a work-only chat platform. He showed me the screenshots of his conversations with Mike, who was basically saying things like, "I'll protect her to my dying breath from scum like you," and "if you break her heart, I'll break you." This was some of the most cringeworthy and disturbing stuff I'd ever read from someone I actually know in real life. The other guy rightfully asked me what the hell was going on, asking me if I had told Mike we were together or something. He said that if I did, he apologizes for sending me the wrong signals, as he's definitely not interested. I was pretty pissed by now, not just because Mike was threatening one of the few friendships I have at work, but because the entire situation was fucked up. I messaged Mike and asked him to stop threatening my friend, while also apologizing to the other guy for the misunderstanding. Mike texted back saying, "I'm just looking out for you, that's what brothers do." I took a deep breath before messaging him back to tell him that he is a very good friend, emphasis on friend, but that I don't need to be looked out for. I really don't. He came back with, "Then I'll just protect you from the shadows," with a winky face. He said some other cringy shit about me being young and naive, which makes me a target, but by that point I was 300% done with whatever he thought, so I just blocked him. The next morning, Mike came in late, sat down, and immediately texted me on Slack asking if I was okay, which I ignored. A bit later, he got up for a smoke break, and as he walked past my desk, he said, "Hey, I Slacked you, did you see?" Yeah, of course I saw, but I wasn't playing his games anymore. I gave him some generic, "sorry, I'm busy" line, and got back to work. Lunch came and went, and the day went on without a word from him, until about 10 minutes before it was time to go home, when I suddenly got a wall of text on Slack that made me realize what's going on in Mike's head is nowhere close to reality. He says that he thinks I'm lashing out because I'm hurt and angry because of my trauma. I assume he's referring to my depressive episode from years ago. He says he'll stand by his dear friend because he made a promise to be my brother and defender, and that he's not going to take the easy way out and let me go just because I'm hurt. He finishes his rant by telling me he actually wants me to take out my pain and anger on him because he can take it. As I sat there reading all of this, all I could think was, what the fuck? Mike logged off for the day as I was still processing his message. I went down to the parking lot some 20 minutes later, and there he was, smoking next to his car. I ignore him as I walk past, thanking God that there were other people around, and he just stood there, unmoving, staring at me as I got into my car and drove away. This was the point where I started to consider involving a manager. We have 2 managers, a younger guy and a woman, Pete and Pam. I started writing a long email to both of them, and also thought about talking to my other friend from work to back me up, since he had experienced Mike's harassment firsthand. In the end, I decided not to. Mike had a kid on the way, and he was clearly in need of mental help, which he probably wasn't getting. I wasn't about to get him fired and take away his livelihood. Unfortunately, I ended up regretting that decision. Things were as close to normal as they could be for a while after. I caught Mike staring at me a few times, but I pretended not to notice. Then, after a few weeks of nothing, one of the other girls on our team said she had something to tell me. We went out for coffee during lunch at the cafe across the street that pretty much everyone in the building goes to. She told me Mike had been talking to other coworkers about me and my pain, how I'm struggling with my depression and it's so bad that it's even making me push my family away. He told them about how he's been trying to help me, and it breaks his heart that I won't let him in, because he cares for me so much. I asked her how many other people he had been talking to, and she said she knew of at least one. This made me livid. You can't just go around telling people that someone else is mentally ill to make yourself look like a saint. I decided it was finally time to talk to the managers. I slacked Pete, the younger manager, and asked for a quick one-to-one, and he immediately agreed, saying he's actually been meaning to talk to me, and that Pam would be joining too. Crap, this must have to do with what Mike has been telling everyone at the office. We met later that day, and Pete started asking me how I was getting on, if I get along with the rest of the team, and so on. I had a feeling I knew where this was going. Sure as hell, he says, Mike's been saying a lot of good things about you, but his face said otherwise. All the while, Pam was sitting there, not saying much, just nodding and smiling in a way that made me a bit uncomfortable. I started getting super anxious because I'm not a confrontational person usually, and I hate drama, but Mike had crossed all the lines. Still trying to be nice, I said, "Look, I think I gave Mike the wrong impression," and continued with a whitewashed version of what had been going on. Pam finally spoke up. "Did you ask him to stop?" "Well, I guess I didn't technically, but I had assumed blocking him on Facebook and not engaging with him on Slack or offline would send the same message." Pam then proceeded to give me some bullshit advice like, if he starts to talk about inappropriate things, tell him you're uncomfortable, and don't engage with him in personal circumstances or outside of work. They also promised they would assign someone else as my trainer, and that they'll talk to Mike about spreading inappropriate rumors, which I insisted, again, were not true. About a week later, I was heading out to get coffee with the girl who had told me about Mike's rumors and one of her guy friends. As soon as we walked into the cafe, Mike was standing there holding 2 cups of coffee. One of them had my name on it. Thinking back, he must have heard that me and the girl were going out, and ran ahead while we were waiting for her friend. He tried to give the labeled cup to me, and said something about it being just the way I like it, but my heart was racing so fast that I couldn't make out exactly what he was saying, and I was pretty sure I was going to have a heart attack right there and then. By the time I got a hold of myself again, Mike was gone, and my coworker was looking very concerned, asking if I was okay and saying that I looked like death. We went outside while her friend waited in line for us. I was shaking and trying not to cry. She asked what was going on, so I opened up about what had been going on with Mike. By the end of my story, she looked pretty disturbed and recommended that I should talk to the managers. Well, I already did. She said to tell them about today. Part of me stupidly tried to write it off, that he just wanted to buy me coffee, but I couldn't continue to pretend like I was okay with any of this anymore. As soon as we got back to the office, I went straight to Pam. Normally, I'd talk to Pete since he's our direct manager, and Pam's kind of a supervising manager, but I felt more comfortable talking to a woman about this. This time, I told Pam everything, including how Mike threatened someone else over having lunch with me, and how he stares at me, and how he sent me a long, creepy text on Slack that revealed how delusional he is. She asked to see the text, and I told her I would forward it. She asked me to forward everything else that I have. Not that she didn't believe me, but she wanted to fully understand the extent of the problem. She said this with the same knowing, understanding smile from the last meeting, which didn't make me feel too confident. She also asked if Mike had been following me outside of work. I had already mentioned the coffee incident, so I also told her about the staring in the parking lot. There was another pause before she said, "Well, obviously we can't fire him," which made my heart sink. Apparently, she didn't find this serious enough for them to boot him, but they could discipline him for using the company Slack inappropriately. She asked if I wanted to transfer to another team, but I'd still have to work in the same building as the psycho. Finally, she suggested a mediation. A meeting with her, someone from HR, Mike, and me. She didn't sound very convinced that it would do anything, and neither was I, to be honest, panicking at just the thought of talking to him again. Did I agree to mediation? Of course I did. Did it help? Of course it didn't. I was super anxious through the whole meeting. I was literally shaking. I did my best to state in neutral terms that I wanted to have a professional relationship with Mike and only that, and that I wasn't comfortable with him oversharing personal information or talking to other people about my problems, which aren't even real. Throughout the whole damn thing, he was just sitting there saying, "Yeah, okay, with this shit-eating grin on his face, like we were playing a game or something. The only time he had any other reaction was when I indirectly said that he had been making stuff up about me. "Well, you kinda told me that, remember?" he responded, as if that would make any of this okay. The same day, I got a Slack message from him saying, "If you wanted me to give you some space, you should have just asked. No need to go to HR about it." He wasn't sitting at his desk, but he was probably still in the building somewhere. Otherwise, I'm pretty confident I would have lost my shit on him right there and then. I sent back something along the lines of, "Well, I'm saying it now. Please don't ever talk to me again." His reply was, "But we work together, silly," with a winky face. Not long after this HR mediation thing, my brother was picking me up from work one day because my car was in the shop. For a bit of background, my brother is a pretty big guy, but a non-violent person, even if he looks intimidating. I was getting into the car when I saw Mike, smoking in his car and giving us the meanest stink eye you can imagine. I'm pretty sure he had been waiting there for me to come out of the building, which wouldn't be the first time. This wasn't just staring anymore either. It was, "I'll kill you in your sleep" staring. My brother noticed and asked me if that was Mike. I said yes, but begged him to just drive away. Before I could stop him, he was already walking over. As soon as Mike saw my brother coming, he got verbally aggressive, threatening to run him over and even saying that he had a gun. Hearing this, I completely lost it. I walked over and just started screaming at him. I've never in my life let loose on someone like this, before or since, and I honestly scared myself that time. Mike ended up driving off when I was in the middle of it. I was hysterical for the rest of the evening, and I called in sick the next day. I just couldn't stand the thought of being anywhere near this person again. While I was out sick, I received a text from an unknown number that just said, "Bitch." Just that. My brother was already telling me that I should quit my job and pursue a restraining order because it was obvious that my workplace wasn't going to protect me. He offered to let me stay at his place with him and his girlfriend for a while if I was worried about money. My mind still wasn't made up, but That same evening, I received a picture message of a man slitting his wrist. I couldn't see a face in the picture, but it was painfully obvious that it was Mike fucking with me. I blocked the number and quit my job the next day. I also stayed with my brother and his girlfriend for a while, but Mike never tried to get in touch again. Or, if he did, I never knew about it because I blocked him across everything. That is, until last week. LinkedIn will sometimes show you people who looked at your profile and will display their photo even if you don't have the paid subscription. Last week, I saw that Mike had looked at my profile. He's still with my old company. Needless to say, I've been freaking the fuck out since then, especially since I'm sure LinkedIn showed him that I looked at his profile too. After sharing this story and getting some advice online, my brother and I have both decided to pursue legal action, since we've both been harassed and threatened by Mike. And even though almost a year has passed, the fact that he's still looking me up shows that he's not done. From 2006 to 2011, I worked in the electronics department at the local Walmart in the small city I lived in. For those 5 years I had worked there, I had plenty of creepy encounters with strange customers, especially considering that the state hospital was directly across the road. This story isn't just a regular old creepy encounter, but something that would lead to me being stalked for nearly a year. It all started in 2010, on a night I was working second shift. I was doing my end-of-shift ritual when a woman in her late 40s interrupted me. She was with a little girl, no more than 3 or 4. "Excuse me, I need help with my cell phone." She spoke softly and proceeded to tell me her problem. "I need to turn my phone into a straight talk phone. The girl earlier said you could do it." Of fucking course she did, I thought to myself, but my lips said, "Sure, let's see what I can do." She handed me a 6-year-old phone from Verizon, and I knew as soon as I saw it that I wouldn't be able to do what she wanted. I explained that she would have to buy a new phone from Straight Talk and transfer her old number. Basic shit, really. Now, I always took my job seriously and held myself to the highest standard of customer service. I would often receive letters to the store from customers complimenting me. So I assure you I did nothing to actually piss off this lady, but sure as shit, she was pissed. "Why the hell would I buy a new phone? I already have one." She was screaming at the top of her lungs, claiming that I was upselling her and that I was a corporate goon. I finally managed to defuse the situation, and as she left the department, she gave me the classic line, "You'll never get a job in this town again." As I was getting ready to leave my shift, my manager stopped me and told me I got a complaint at customer service from a lady claiming that I swore at her granddaughter. Apparently, I told her to fuck off. I explained what happened and he just laughed it off. My managers knew it was very unlike me to say anything like that to a customer. I wish the story ended there, but then I wouldn't be writing this. For the next several weeks, I would get complaints about things I've never done. Sometimes even on my days off. I would come in to questions from management nearly every day. It was complaints ranging from me being rude to a customer all the way to me doing drugs in the parking lot on break. All these complaints were coming from 2 women. As it turned out, it was Cell Phone Lady and her adult daughter. They had been scoping out my work schedule and started coming in nearly every day, walking through electronics to make sure that they saw me, and later that night I would have a complaint. This happened for months. It happened so much that management deemed her my favorite customer. To be honest, it didn't bother me much. I even thought it was pretty funny. I never got in trouble, and everyone knew these ladies and just blew it off. I started caring when she took it to a new level. She started to follow me around. I would see her when I was around town. She made it clear she knew where I lived and would regularly walk by my house. I would see her standing out front just looking at my place. I began getting complaints to the city about my property. Grass too tall, the old shed in my yard, my fire pit, basically everything. She even found out my girlfriend's name and began complaining at her job. I knew it was her. She would make it so clear that she was following me. Sometimes she would stop in and ask me questions at work, putting on an act to pretend like she was the nicest customer around. A few times she asked me things like, "How's your girlfriend?" Or, my favorite, "How can you afford that big house on your little Walmart wage?" For about 7 months, she stalked and slandered me. I told her during one of our interactions that I knew what she was doing and she had to stop, but she just played dumb. I couldn't report her since she never once threatened me. She was just making my life difficult. By this time, everyone in my life knew about this nut job. One night, I was grabbing dinner with my friends from work, and we were joking around about it when someone said, "What if you just counter-stalk her?" Of course, I thought it was a terrible idea at first, but they convinced me it would work and that they would help me. So we hatched a plan like a group of spies. It went as follows. Find her job, find her name and address, make complaints in the same manner as her, find out all the rumors she's told about me, make it clear we know, show her that we have numbers. I found out her information easily enough. Turns out she didn't live anywhere near me. I was even friends with a few of her coworkers. They would keep me informed on crazy shit she said about me and even told her to stop. We began doing exactly what she was doing to me. We did this for about 4 months. The more we dug into her life, the more I found out about how obsessed she was over getting me in trouble. She had claimed that I assaulted her. She urged others to report and follow me, and she even told police I was a potential drug dealer. Eventually, we won though. She started putting together that there were 6 of us digging into her life and asking questions about her. My last month at work, I didn't get a single complaint. In fact, I never even saw her anymore. The day after I quit, though, I heard she was in the store complaining about someone new after asking one of the managers why I left. I'll honestly never understand why she was so hellbent on destroying me. After all, I just told her to buy a $20 prepaid phone.